Healthcare is the largest industry in Canada. It's the largest industry in the developed world. It's 1/5 of the US economy. So it's 20% of GDP in the US. If we actually are deploying money into healthcare, why can't we scale Canadian companies? What's the problem?
We are in all 50 states. We've scaled across the US on our medical side. We are building out our pharmacy operation in the US.
The big break happened in the spring when we closed our first US health system. It's an amazing academic medical center based in Manhattan.
We want you guys to be point-click care. $1 billion in revenue, 3,000 jobs in Mississauga. They are the market leader. And so just briefly about how I joined the True North Fund. My background is in healthcare innovation and change, everything from merging and scaling hospitals to research and innovation. And I started working on the problem on behalf of Mary Ng, who was our trade minister and small business leader at the federal government. And she was asking the question of, why do we have so many small companies and not so many large companies? And in particular, in an environment like healthcare, where we have a single payer, so healthcare is the largest industry in Canada. It's the largest industry in the developed world. It's 1/5 of the US economy. So it's 20% of GDP in the US. When people think about, okay, defense is exciting, but it's 4.5%, 5% max. Energy is exciting, but even in the US, that's sort of 6 to 7% of GDP. Healthcare is fascinating and exciting. It's 20% of GDP in the US, 12% of GDP in Canada. So the minister said, well, if we actually are deploying money into healthcare, why can't we scale Canadian companies? What's the problem? And at that point, there was really very little adoption. So we invented this thing called Can Health. And the concept behind Can Health was that we would bring together 50 of the best organizations in Canada, from the health authorities in Vancouver to Nova Scotia to great hospitals like Sick Kids and UHN and CHUM in Montreal, and also primary care and long-term care. And we'll bring together this marketplace with procurement and adoption, start scaling Canadian companies, because the issue was around adoption. So that's actually how I was coming at the story of how do you build Canada and build billion-dollar organizations, is that if we have great Canadian companies, but we don't actually get them adopted, then they just get American customers, American capital, they become great American companies. And that's our history in Canada. So when you look at Ozempic or GLP-1s, that's Dan Drucker at the University of Toronto. If you look at insulin, that's Toronto. They've all been commercialized outside. So I'm going to be with two, I think, amazing protagonists that are attacking the Canadian market. And so True North, as a funder in the secondary market, is part of a larger ecosystem that we're building, which is Can Health, which helps scale and adopt Canadian companies. And our largest thing that we did was with Point Click Care and the Wessingers, who are LPs in the fund, where we had their product procured by St. Joe's in Hamilton. And then Ontario then lifted that procurement to do the first time in Ontario's history where they put the same IT system across the platform. So that's the work that we do. Yeah, a little bit less than that, but it basically kept Point Click Care in Canada. Point Click Care is an amazing company, $1 billion in revenue. Wessinger Brothers control it. And it's also what Chris was saying. They invest in the ecosystem now. They're investors in True North. They mentor companies. They cheer for Canada. And they're a great story. And they take care of 700 million patient interactions a year and improve healthcare. They improve the delivery of healthcare and the safety of healthcare. That's how healthcare is going to change. We have great public institutions, but it's on the technology side. We're at this incredibly exciting moment. So as I move into the panel here, what's so interesting is you get these sort of interesting protagonists attacking healthcare, and sort of the chance for the system to innovate. It's now coming from outside, and it is really exciting. We're seeing lots of great companies improve access and quality and flow. So I'll start with Pete and Mar. I'm going to get you to tell a little bit about your personal stories of how you got involved. So Pete, I'll get you to start. You're an investment banker in Calgary.
Yeah.
How do you go from an investment banker to now operating and running one of Canada's fastest growing and most successful healthcare technology?
Yeah. So hi, everyone. I'm Pete McLeod. I'm a co-founder and COO at Purpose Med. How do I go from being an investment banker to a healthcare company? Well, It's probably January. It's cold. It's dreary. My co-founder Hussein has said, "Why are you working 80 hours a week? You should be working for. You should work for yourself. Let's start a healthcare company." I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this. And then he says the next week, and that's another, what do you know, 100-hour week. And I'm like, you could have asked me to do anything. So after a couple of weeks of prodding me along, I eventually decided, okay, I'm gonna quit investment banking and let's go build a healthcare company. Hussein is a physician, and he saw this revolving door in healthcare, so he knew he wanted to attack the healthcare market, and we would have a niche. But also, growing up, both my parents were physicians, so I always was drawn to healthcare, and I wanted to do this. So when Hussein was, pushing me in the right direction, my parents are pushing me in the right direction. It just became like a very natural fit to eventually leave and then go start Purpose Med.
Okay, great. We'll hear about Purpose Med in there, what they do in a moment. But I think you're gonna see this story of these interesting groups of people that are actually now attacking healthcare, and they're these interesting groups of physicians with technologists and others. So Mara, but Mara's one of like the leading academics in Canada, an amazing professor, early professor at Rotman, and one of the leading thinkers. How do you go from being one of the leading academics in Canada to running now Signal one of the great technology?
Sure. And thank you, Dante, and everyone for inviting me. I'm Mar Letterman. I'm co-founder and COO of a company called Signal One, which we'll talk about. I'm going to have three things in common with Pete. I don't come from healthcare. I have a persuasive co-founder, and I come from a family of healthcare professionals. But our path is a little bit different. So as Dante said, I am an economist, grew up in Toronto, went to MIT to do a PhD, came back, took a faculty position at the Rotman School of Management in 2003, right when the dean at the time, Roger Martin, and Joe Rotman was trying to turn that into a world-class business school. Had a really wonderful and initially, I think, very standard academic career. And then, like many academics, after I got tenure, I had the opportunity to explore a bunch of things. And 2012, 2015, you couldn't really be at U of T without getting the kind of AI commercialization bug because of the breakthroughs that were happening over in computer science, by the programs we were launching in the business school, including the Creative Destruction Lab that many people here are familiar with, trying to kind of do a lot of the work that you've done and people in this room have done, which is connect the dots between, great Canadian science and the ability to build great Canadian companies. And so I got sucked in, as many people did, into the world of entrepreneurship by taking on leadership of Creative Destruction Lab. I launched our healthcare programs. We had all of these AI companies with great technologies trying to find the industry to apply their breakthroughs in. They were all gravitating to healthcare, and they were having almost no success for reasons we'll talk about: no access to the healthcare system, lack of buying incentives, problems you've tried to solve. And so part of it for me is I just saw this technology starting to have impact in so many spheres other than healthcare, and that was frustrating. I had a front row view, I think, to some of the challenges a lot of healthcare startups were having around scale, around access, around sort of the infrastructure and sort of core technology in health systems. And as an economist, as we went through COVID, and I think the challenges of our healthcare system became so apparent, and it became obvious that without innovation, we would never, as a country, be able to make sort of supply and demand for healthcare services line up. And then I had a co-founder who called me up in COVID. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm locked up with my teenagers." I go, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm locked up with my teenagers. Let's meet in a park." And so we met in a park, and my co-founder, Tomi Poutinen, who's a serial entrepreneur and an investor in the fund, said, "It's time to start a healthcare company that addresses all of those challenges we've been watching play out for the last couple years." I, too, come from a family of physicians and social workers and psychologists, and always felt the bug. And after 20 years as an academic, was ready to go sort of do to lead change as opposed to just sort of study change. So many similarities, I think, to Pete.
So the interesting thing about healthcare, as they're saying, just the size of the market, and what you're seeing is a complete supply-demand mismatch. It's not getting better. So So there's pros and cons of the Canadian model over the US model over the Australian model. But if you actually study healthcare systems, they're all struggling. Like it's fundamentally because you have a burden of disease and a supply system that isn't matching, and the supply system isn't changing to meet that burden of disease. So it's basically a complete market failure at a time where there's a lot of money going into it, and the technology is now actually hitting to a point where it can actually improve it. It's the same way that, BlackBerry, there had to be a moment where the battery was strong enough, the antenna was strong enough, the technology was strong enough to then birth the smartphone. The same thing is happening in healthcare. You've got macro factors that are causing pressure, dislocation of the consumer from the system. The system's actually now starting to make bets on technology because they have to. And then technology coming to a point with AI devices, point of care blood work, and all the things that you need to then completely change the market. Healthcare is the big one, 20% of GDP. It doesn't commoditize over the next 30 years. A lot of things will. Healthcare will continue to have investment. So now we have two different protagonists. One, attacking the direct-to-consumer market. That's where you're going to see a lot of change because people can go right around their doctors now. They can go right to platforms. And then another that's into the hospital side, adopting AI and technology. So Pete, maybe tell us a little bit of what does PurposeMed do and how did you get to where you are right now? And just give us a little bit of a sense of the company.
Yeah. So PurposeMed is a direct-to-consumer telehealth company. We built a number of niche brands that speak to specific communities. And we are fundamentally creating new front doors for these communities to access care. So our main brand, Freddie, does HIV care and prevention. We have a second brand, Frida, that does mental health services and ADHD. And then we have a third, that Foria, that does trans and non-binary care. So in terms of how we scaled, we didn't have any money. So we needed to pick very specific niche treatment areas where we could have a competitive advantage. We needed something that was at the intersection of primary care and specialized care that was fundamentally underserviced. And so when we started Freddie, gay men and the LGBTQ community have challenges accessing care. It's highly stigmatized. Most people don't want to go talk to their doctor. When you go talk to your doctor, they don't know what you're talking about, and you could be more educated to them. So between Hussein and our chief medical officer, when my other co-founder Aman is here, they started scheming up all these different ideas where we could have diagnosis through home delivery of how we would navigate the healthcare system and make it easier for patients. We wanted to look at these niche treatment areas where we were going to have a competitive advantage. And, maybe the population base wouldn't be that big, but we would be able to fundamentally solve a problem for patients in just accessing care.
Cool. Yeah. So I think what he's describing is this concept that the consumer or the patient or the individual or citizen is sort of held hostage by your primary care doctor, and they're good people, or your hospital system. That's actually starting to go away. The same way that we used to go to Blockbuster Video and you had to rewind your tape and get late fees, and you were sort of held hostage by an experience, and then poof, it's gone. So proof isn't going to happen quite as fast because it's a bit more interesting experience. But what this company did is found a segment that is actually a high user of the system and who is being completely underserved for both expertise and access, and then wrap the company around them extremely successfully. That's what you're going to continue to see. That's not stopping. And so this dislocation of the individual with the system and companies that can provide a far better experience and business models around it is a big part of the future of healthcare. And you're seeing it with PurposeMed. Mara, so tell us about, you're the opposite of that. You're like coming at it from the hospital infrastructure side. So maybe talk a little bit about what Signal One does.
Yeah, and we're much more of a traditional B2B SaaS company. Our product is what we call an AI management system. It's essentially a platform that allows a hospital or a health system, which is a set of hospitals, to govern all of the AI applications that they seek to operate within the walls of their hospital or even beyond the walls of the hospital. Let me take a step back back, I think, and explain to the room, why this is important. And so much of our focus today is on scaling. So there's a whole story here around scaling AI. Picking up on what Dante said, health systems here and in the US are actually facing the exact same problem, this inability to meet the healthcare demands of whether it's their population or their, patient base due to their insurance contracts. People are living longer, and they're living longer, as you know better than I do, with more chronic conditions. And that's like great news that we're getting everyone to live longer, but that's putting a lot of demands on healthcare. Traditionally, the way we meet demand is by growing supply, but we cannot. There's not a single hospital I've met in any country that thinks they can hire or build their way out of the current situation. So the only thing to do is to make their existing asset base, their physical assets and their people, more productive. How do you do that in every other industry? You do it with technology. And technology is, including and especially AI, is finally at the point where it can actually sort of drive these productivity increases, both within the walls of hospitals, but also through like novel models of care, hospital at home and remote patient monitoring and virtual nursing and virtual care and all sorts of truly lower cost delivery models. And they all think AI is the answer. And yet to date, it actually hasn't delivered very much in terms of like meaningful and realized ROI, at least in the US health systems who have been doing it longer and who have actually tried to measure it. Quite frankly, if you ask most US health systems, where do they see tangible value from ROI? They will all tell you it's in their revenue cycle. What does that mean? It's not true value creation. It is in their disputes with insurance companies over how much of the revenue they bill for, they get paid for. That consumes a huge amount of resources, and using AI there has been like the one place they will say they are seeing value. And so when you take a step back and you're like, why am I hearing so much about these incredible breakthroughs in healthcare AI, and everyone's doing all of these pilots and they're scribes and these are writing notes? And then you listen to hospitals and you see very little reality. You have to ask the question of like, where is the disconnect? And so that's where our company comes in. And I'd love to say we realized right at the beginning, but there's enough founders in this room that will say whatever you're doing 3.5 years into your company is not where we started the company. We started as an AI application company, and you know that, Dante, because we spoke to you before we even launched. And we started building applications, and we realized the applications aren't the problem. It is the core infrastructure. And so hospitals, more in the US than Canada, we're very behind here. I know this is a bit of a rah-rah Canada thing. We're very, very behind in healthcare AI. They have been running pilots for 2.5 years of a huge number of AI applications. They can't measure the ROI. They can't scale them. They don't know which one should go from one hospital to the 30 hospitals in their network. And they have no ability to monitor and manage the risk associated. And so this early enthusiasm has kind of stalled in hospitals with these series of pilots because they don't have the core AI infrastructure that they need to test things quickly, to trial them, at the bedside, to measure impact, to scale them to other units in hospitals, and to govern them in accordance with sort of increasingly manual set of AI governance. And that's the problem we've set out to solve. We want to be that unlock layer that lets them do AI kind of safely and at scale. So that might have been a bit longer, but I wanted to sort of position it.
Cool though, because like they're the chassis that enters in. Like when we first started talking to them, they're like, we're going to do a deterioration algorithm, and we're like, well, no, we don't know. I remember arguing. They told me for a while about that. That's not going to work. And he's like, but I'm saving lives. I said, it doesn't matter. It's not going to work. And so like, but any of us. Yeah, no, but that's always the irony of dealing with hospitals but this concept of the chassis that hooks into these systems that allows you then to scale the algorithms and govern them and monitor them is a really good product market fit. And it has a huge potential to change systems right now. Pete, tell me about your scale, your customers, where you are right now and how you're attacking the market and how you see a path to $1 billion.
Yeah, so we've scaled across Canada. And as we've done that, like we built out a playbook to vertically integrate and expand margins. So we now do diagnosis through home delivery of medication, and really the margin is built on the pharmacy side. So we're scaled across Canada. Now in the US, the model is different. And we now, as of October 1st, we are in all 50 states. We've scaled across the US on our medical side. We are building out our pharmacy operation in the US. So replicating that same playbook, when we look at the numbers, that will take us probably to 200 million in revenue when we replicate our Canadian playbook in the US. And then there's opportunities to vertically integrate. So add additional services for patients, build out a second core treatment, full treatment in the US in HIV care. And then, we've looked at how do we, like the lab component of both the Canadian and the US operation is very broken. So those are two areas where we can expand margin, generate additional revenue, but actually make our patient experience so much better by owning all of those services when patients go through our journey.
So what's really cool about, they've got this segment, they're driving that segment, they're right across the US, and then learning how to do that at scale. And like there's the investment side of Purpose Med, which is amazing because it's such a fast growing, profitable company that has been super capital efficient. But there's actually a really nice altruistic side of it as well, that they're providing a far better patient experience and better care for a huge number of individuals. So really, really cool story. Mart, talk about your story. How are you going? How did you go from inception to now crossing over into the US?
Sure. And I met Pete was a year and a half ago, and the company, it's amazing to see. I said, well, last time we met, you guys were talking about the US, the fact that they're in 50. I mean, getting into one state is crazy, and states don't always play nice together. So you're being modest, but I just want on his behalf emphasize the fact that they're in all 50 states is incredibly remarkable. What? He was burying the headline, and so I think the headline worth is worth just elevating a little bit. So I wish we were as big and a revenue of these guys. So I hope in a year or two we'll be there. We started in Canada. Our hypothesis was always we kind of build and learn in Canada, but the real market or the big market for us is in the US. Not that we don't want to build a Canadian company, but everyone in this room knows you can't build a big enough healthcare company just selling in Canada. It's not interesting to investors. And the choice of platforms is going to play out in the US much earlier than it will in Canada, just as it did with things like EMRs, which have diffused much more quickly across US health systems than in Canada, just like US health systems have moved to the cloud much earlier than Canadian hospitals. So for us, it was always going to be important to get those first few anchor US health systems, build the business there while having a select set of partners in Canada that we learned from, and then being here for Canada when Canada was ready for us. First product to the platform we launched at Trillium, really in the deal that we did, Dante, with you and supported by Can Health. I think for us the big thing is we need to get a foothold in the US now and quickly, because they are at an inflection point around AI. They are in this kind of part of the curve where they are trying to transition from what you'd call pilot mode to AI at an industrial scale. And they are trying to figure out who are this set of technology partners and frankly, consulting firm partners that they need to surround themselves with. They are all determining their kind of modern health stack. So, a lot of Epic as an EMR, a lot of Databricks, a lot of choice of, between the cloud providers. And we knew that we kind of had to get in now while the leading systems were making sort of the decisions around their kind of modern AI tech stack. And so we've kind of run fast and hard at the right set of partners to choose us, because what is true in the US is they all start to follow each other. And so for us, we think about the path to billion, and it's crazy to think about the path to billion, but you kind of have to, right? That's what you're being asked to do. And we're hopeful that it will unfold in multiple stages. So right now, health systems are all in this sort of period of trying to figure out, where do we get all of our AI? Do we build it? Do we buy it from every tool with a best-in-breed vendor? Do we get it from a small set of platforms like our, bundled into our EMR? The big health systems are running 200 AI applications. They're not here. In the US, they are. And they plan to double that in the next 12 to 18 months. So there's going to be this kind of shakeout where there's no way they're going to have 200 AI applications from 200 suppliers. There's just too much cyber risk of doing that. And so our feeling is kind of step one, be the platform that helps them manage what they're doing now. Step two, be the platform that allows them to choose and monitor and evaluate their best-in-breed vendors. So be a bit of a distribution play. Long term, Tommy and I have a view, we could be wrong, and we're still putting this view together, that health systems will eventually want to build a lot of their own AI, just like large enterprises and the banks and insurance companies are here. At some point, they'll look and say, why are we paying all of these consulting firms and all of these vendors? We could just hire a bunch of data scientists. And we think technologies like foundation models will accelerate that. And so really the long-term play is to position ourselves for when health systems are ready to make that jump and be the partner on a tech side that enables that. So that's how we're thinking about it. It's early days, right? But that's the story as we're putting it together right now.
You would be the market leader in the space that you're in.
I think right now, which we think of as our beachhead, we are positioned to be the market leader. And as a young Canadian company, you take these little signs like getting inbound from U.S. hospitals when it always had to be outbound, getting hospitals send you their RFPs, and you're like, wait, you just wrote an RFP for a product that sounds like ours. And we're just starting to see that happen in the last 2 to 3 months.
And the thing about healthcare is it's a high social trust business of referrals. So that's actually how how we operate is we get one incumbent buyer, and then we get the buyer to sell to the rest of the market. So if you walk into, IWK, which is a women's and children's hospital in Nova Scotia, and say, hi, I'm a vendor from here, that actually doesn't hold. There's actually a lot of skepticism. But if Sick Kids calls ahead and says, we really like this company and we've already bought it, then it's actually a secret handshake in. So healthcare is interesting, and so is government, where it's hard to be first, but once you're in, it's hard to get out. Like there's almost like a moat of how healthcare works. And this concept of, now that you're in and you're a market leader, everyone talks to each other and everybody wants to be the same, which is a fascinating part of the barriers to entry are high, but they're high for your competitors as well. And I think the story that we are trying to change at scale is someone like Tommy and Mara both. Tommy being Jeffrey Hinton protege, so great. We talk about great inventing AI here at the University of Toronto in Canada, and that entrepreneur then creating a company that Trillium and Grand River, because there's two big EMRs, there's Cerner or Oracle and Epic. Signal One gets access to those IT systems in a trusted way, gets product market fit through Trillium, gets purchased, now scaling to Vancouver and others. Our market in Canada allows you to get your beachhead, your capital, your customer, your head office, and then now you're attacking the U.S. So we want you guys to be Point Click Care. Point Click Care, $1 billion in revenue, 3,000 jobs in Mississauga. They are the market leader. They have one long-term care EMRs. I think it's completely feasible. We are going to be sitting here in not that long with these two companies owning direct to consumer and segmented, and then also into this AI chassis and governance construct, which I think is going to be really important. So I'll pause again, see if anybody has any questions at all. And I think I've got 5 minutes. Okay. Oh, question. Yes, sir.
Where are we in terms of like AI productivity here? Like, what would you say the unlock is today? And
I think we're still pretty far. And I think the reality is and Dante can comment on this too, it is very hard to integrate AI tools inside clinical workflows and clinical operations. We talk a lot about it, and we think of AI as being kind of the next evolution of more traditional clinical decision support. But even in U.S. hospitals who are more ambitious and more incentivized because the margin pressure they're feeling is so strong right now, they are very reluctant to put AI deeply within clinical care. And so I think where are the big opportunities or the ones that I think will play out first? So I hate to say it, but kind of revenue operations in the US is what we're seeing. Billing, but billing's complicated, right? So the first thing is translating, the services that the doctors provided into a list of codes that generate a bill that go to the insurance company, matching that with the nuances of your contract with that insurance company, getting the things in. Anyways, it's boring, but
just to pause there, billing is like 1.5% of GDP of the US.
Yeah, no. I mean, it uses a lot of people, right? And all of that is cost that isn't a direct cost of patient care. I mean, I would say the next biggest thing the US hospitals have adopted, and again, I know hospitals more than I know, say, community practices, is scribes. Everybody has got ambient listening and associated AI scribes. They are mixed on whether they think there is a true productivity effect. What would the productivity effect be? Less time writing notes. Most of that note writing happens after hours, so your doctors may be happier. It may not change their productive hours during the day, but what you would look for from a productivity perspective is the ability for them to see more patients during daytime hours, in turn generating net new revenue. I think a big opportunity for revenue is going to come from agentic AI being used to either supplement or displace a lot of front office administrative healthcare workers who do things like schedule colonoscopies and send out the instructions and remind patients which medications to stop before procedures. And there's a lot of waste that happens through people not being prepared, or no-shows, or not following instructions, or needing to change appointments. And I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think it's relatively low risk. And I think that will generate a big productivity effect. I mean, the biggest productivity effect would be things like truly cutting length of stay. Like, how do I turn over my hospital beds and my hospital staff? That's what you really want to do. Take that asset base and generate more patient encounters from it. It doesn't matter that much here because you're not paid per patient, but in the US, it definitely matters. That one's harder, other than, I think, some very specific ways of almost like diverting patients, right out of the emergency room into a virtual or a home care program. But those types of things, there are other niche areas where like productivity of operating rooms are going up because you use AI to schedule more efficiently. But it's hard. Like the basic economics of a hospital, it's cost and revenue. You don't change, you're a price taker, right? So you don't change prices. You're either doing more stuff, keeping more of the revenue you bill, or you truly need to lower costs. And given costs are largely labor and pharmaceuticals, it's hard to do that. Anyways, that might have been a longer answer, but
Yeah, you see these software companies, public statements saying, "Oh, you maybe 30% that look." Like, is there any quantifying? Is it 5% or?
I mean, I don't think you can make a general. Every AI tool, you have to think about the ROI in that context. So I think you could measure things like an X% increase in surgery suite uptime, in OR uptime. Like, that's like a real productivity increase, right? We schedule better. We don't get these like random hours that we can't schedule. And so OR utilization and surgeon utilization is higher. We could measure things like that, for example. People have tried to measure, like I said, extra billing as a result of the use of scribes, cutting down on administrative and documentation tasks for healthcare providers. I think in general, how much more productive are we making healthcare workers? Like, if I put on my economist hat, I don't think any economist would say like that's a number we should actually try to calculate it. We should think of it in the context of particular roles and outcomes. Even though people like headlines like that, of course.
So, Mara, I look at what you're doing, and can you take what you're doing and say, hey, this can work also for finance, it's going to work for all sorts of other industry, to see a path to go, we'll be a part of here, and then you can do 2.0 and going, hey, thanks, insurance payers, etc.
So it's a good question, and I can give you a very specific. We are a vertical solution for healthcare. And in fact, we came from a bank. So my partner told me he sold his last company to TD Bank. He built out at Layer 6, he built out their center of excellence. And in many ways, the platform we built is trying to solve problems that he had to solve for the bank when they wanted to scale AI across the bank. And we're saying, like, look, no hospital is going to buy a startup and have a 70-person team. How do we create a platform in a box almost that solves that? We believe that healthcare is unique enough that it needs a vertical as opposed to a horizontal kind of AI governance solution. But there's lots of space within healthcare to go from providers potentially to payers who have more money, to pharma, everybody in health. I mean, even the device manufacturers are now running algorithms on all the data that's generated off their hardware. Every one of those need a management system, and those need to be connected. So we do see a lot of room to move within healthcare. And it's even someone like Point Click Care, we've talked to them, we are in the US, they're basically the electronic medical record system for long-term care. they're running AI, right? They could be a partner, right? So that's the way we think about our expansion so far within healthcare, as opposed to, becoming a totally horizontal solution.
Okay, Pete, what do you see in the future? And also, like, what I what I believe the consumer market is so exciting, right?
Right.
Because it's like it's just beginning. It's actually, once you get your genetic information, your wearables, a little bit of your blood work, and some of your social factors, and you run AI on that, you actually know more than anything. Like, you can't, no doctor can compete, and you then go to the market and say, this is what I want, and nobody will stop you, particularly if it's got references attached to it. So yeah, there's a company, ProMeta AI, that's doing that, but the the space in consumer is so exciting because it basically is the it's going to drive these systems to change, because it just disaggregates them from the existing system. Pete, talk a little bit about, like, you have deep knowledge of segments.
Yeah.
How do you see that growing? What do you see happening?
So, like, one opportunity is just in general, like in Canada, like the healthcare system is failing. So there is going to be so much opportunity and margin for so many Canadian companies moving forward, because they are going to have so many problems to solve for consumers. But like, that's a whole segment in itself. In terms of like AI and personalization, I think we have seen exactly what you've talked about. Scribes make people more efficient, but it was actually the work before the scribe, when we changed our clinical flow, that we saw efficiency improvements. You know, we use a agentic super dialing AI tool that calls insurance companies, and that saves us money. But like, that's not really the exciting part. But now what we're seeing with us, especially on the direct to consumer side, is that we have so much data about these patients. We can personalize every patient experience at scale. And so we know how to talk to them in the right way. We know how to present the right information. We can promote adherence. And when you're a healthcare company on the direct to consumer side, where your revenue is like dictated by, does someone have adherence? Do they take medication every day? Now we can support adherence at scale across so many more patients, so much more effectively, and really grow our business in that way. And then the last thing that I actually think is really exciting is, like, how do you eliminate so much friction but keep healthcare human? And what's the intersection between digital healthcare and like physical and human healthcare? So like, we have pharmacies. Does that person need a call from a pharmacist, or should they just get a form to refill? Do we know that they are experiencing adherence problems, and they actually need like a vote of confidence and trust that we're doing the right thing? When someone comes into their first experience, should they, based on a number of factors, are they a candidate for just like streamlining through? Or again, like, does that human interaction make their healthcare journey more meaningful? So there's going to be really cool opportunities where you can marry like technology and humans really, really well.
Very cool. Okay, well, I hope that got you excited about healthcare. Amazing market. The technology is fantastic. The devices and what you're able to do for people, and how small it's going to get. The ability of what you can do at home is, if you have an ultrasound probe and you can take someone's blood, and you have AI, you can completely disrupt the models. And I think these are two amazing Canadian companies on their journey to being winners and improving the health of the population. So thank you both for spending some time with us.